What is good, Dynasty fans? This is Levi with Data Driven Dynasty bringing you another episode, and we are talking about the cheapest production that money can buy in fantasy football today. So let's get right into it. I dove into the depths of startup ADP to find you the absolute cheapest production that you can buy at every position. So we are going to be looking at 15 rounds and later, and I can guarantee you that none of these players are going to break Dynasty next season, and the majority of them have a good chance of going to zero value by this time next year. But they are so cheap that it doesn't matter. The advice that I would give is that if you are looking for some cheap production to bolster your roster going into next season or at the end of a startup draft, try and get some of these guys for third and fourth round picks and save your first and second round picks for in season. That way, um, you'll have the higher value assets to make moves for some veterans during the season if you feel like you really need them, or if your team is not doing so well, you still have those assets to try and tank and retool for next season. So to start off, I just want to run through a list of players who are cheap but still too expensive to make the list. We have guys like Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, Deebo Samuel, Calvin Ridley, Rashad White, Aaron Jones, Brian Robinson, and Dalton Kincaid. And these are all guys who are going in like the 11th, 12th, 13th round of drafts. And I think that the guys later on this list have as good a shot to produce a similar amount of points, and they're just going for a fraction of the price. And so it's not that I hate all these guys. I hate these guys at price, but again, they're just a little bit more expensive than some of these other options, and I think that you'll have an easier time acquiring some of the guys on this list. So first off, we'll start with QB, and we'll go Daniel Jones. Right now, he is going super late in startups, around the 18th round, and his price has been rising, and his startup ADP has been rising as people realize that he might be the starting quarterback for Indianapolis next year. But at least right now, the startup ADP still, it's taking time to come up, and people are really drafting according to that. That being said, it has been harder to acquire him in trades. A couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I got Jones for like 2/3 in a league, and then just today, as I was negotiating, I had to send a second round pick and get a third round pick back in order to get Jones. And while that's like a late second or a projected late second round pick in 2026 and like a mid projected third round pick, it's still a little bit more expensive. But I think that Jones could totally pay off that price tag, especially if the second round pick is projected late. Because while Daniel Jones, in my opinion, is the worst starting caliber quarterback in the NFL, Richardson is not even a starting level quarterback, right? Like, while he has all these crazy physical traits, he can, launch the ball, he can move on the ground. The baseline to be an NFL quarterback is competency throwing the ball. And that is just something that Richardson has not shown. And while, I don't think that he is at price a horrible buy right now, Richardson is, because maybe he figures it out sometime in the future and he can improve. I don't think he's going to be able to improve in the next 3 months, and I think that Jones is easily going to win the starting job for the Colts. And with the much better surrounding cast in Josh Downs, Michael Pittman, Adonai Mitchell, Alec Pierce, and Jonathan Taylor compared to what he had in New England, I think Daniel Jones really has like a QB1 upside, like a top 12 QB upside this season. And again, like if he's going to be the starter all year, what's the difference between him and Justin Fields? Like, I'd probably rather have Fields in a vacuum, but Fields is going in the 8th round of startups, and Daniel Jones is going in the 18th. and they have similar levels of upside and honestly similar levels of security in their jobs right now. So I think Daniel Jones is a great buy, no matter what what your team looks like. I think he's going to increase in value um, significantly, and you can definitely look to try and make a profit off of him, even if you don't need him in your lineup. Now we're going to hop over to wide receiver, and we're going to go with Christian Kirk. It's super easy to visualize the path that Kirk has to being the number 2 option in Houston. I mean, Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel were both drafted on day 2. They're both pretty good prospects, and they'll be competing with Kirk for that number 2 role. But again, they're rookies. We know that Kirk is a solid wide receiver in the NFL. He put up a wide receiver 26 finish in 2021, a wide receiver 11 finish in 2022, and he was even putting up a nice season in 2023, averaging 14.9 points per game in weeks 2 through 12 before he went down with a groin injury. To top it all off, Kirk is only 28 years old, and he could still have multiple low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 seasons left in him. And right, he has to beat out Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel, but I think that he has the ability to do that. He has the ability to be the slot guy, especially early in the season. This would be a game of does he get taken over later in the season as these rookies, get acclimated to the NFL, or do they not? But I think that we've seen that Kirk can, be a good NFL wide receiver. I think that the Texans brought him in because they wanted that veteran presence. They knew that these rookies were going to take some time to develop, and I think they're going to use him. And he's going to be the number 2 receiving option in Houston. And you can get him for late 3rd, early 4th. Now, the next wide receiver is even cheaper than Christian Kirk and might score more points for you. And this is Adam Thielen, who is being drafted around the 25th round of startups. Now, being a 34-year-old wide receiver is definitely not an attractive trait to any dynasty manager, but just last year, he was averaging 14 points a game while he was on the field. That's less than a point less than JSN was putting up. Being a slot guy with reliable hands, it's not surprising that Thielen, with his skill set, has been a productive wide receiver as old as he is. And so I really don't see why, this year would be the year that he would have a huge fall off. Even if he puts up, 80-85% of what he did last year, he could still finish with 11.5, 12 points per game, which again is solid numbers for a guy that you're getting in the 25th round of dynasty startups. And I'm not even worried about Ted McMillan coming into the offense because they play such different roles that I honestly think that they would be more complementary to each other than detracting from each other in that offense. And if Bryce Young looks anything close to how he looked at the end of last year, then he could absolutely support both Tet and Thielen as at least wide receiver 2s. Now, moving over to running back, we have Austin Eckler, who you can get in round 17 or 18 pretty easily in a startup. He scored around 11 points per game last year on average, and Washington really didn't add many weapons in the offseason, at least not any high-end ones. And honestly, Eckler has even more upside than we saw last year in terms of production. In the 3 games that Brian Robinson was out last year while Eckler was still on the field, he put up 15.5 points per game. There's absolutely red flags for Eckler being a 30-year-old running back who has fallen from grace, right? He has no hype, and that's exactly why he's dirt cheap. Getting a guy who has low-end running back 1 production upside in the 18th round is a steal. Eckler honestly was not bad last year. He was very efficient on a per-touch basis, even in the run game. We know that he's good in the passing game and that he can get the job done. That's, his calling card. But in the running game, he ran for 4.8 yards per carry, whereas Brian Robinson, the quote unquote like starter, the better running back, averaged just 4.3 yards per carry. And so I really wouldn't be surprised if Eckler took even more work from Robinson going into next year, knowing that Eckler is the more efficient back. And you have a good shot at getting him for like 2 4th-round picks or sending a third and getting a fourth back. But I think that he's very, very likely to return on value if you just send a 3rd-round pick straight up for him, especially if you went light on running back, or you're like a 0 running back team on a contending team. I think that he could be a great pickup. Next, we've got Zach Moss. Moss was averaging 14.5 points per game in the first 4 weeks of the season before he suffered a high ankle sprain in week 5 and then was eventually out for the season. And during that time, weeks 1 through 4 was the period of time where the Bengals running back room was the most efficient on a per touch basis, right? Like, we look at Chase Brown, we know he's the more efficient running back on the ground. We know that he, rushes for considerably more yards per carry than Moss. But the fact is that whenever Brown gets a higher workload, his efficiency drops off. And so looking at specific numbers, Brown was getting 6.4 yards per carry in the first 4 weeks on a 40% snap share. And whenever he went up to a 60% snap share after Moss's injury, that fell to 5 yards per carry. It fell even further after Moss was out for the season and Brown was forced to carry the whole workload, and it fell to 4.2 yards per carry. And so Chase Brown really wants to be limited on his snap share just as a running back, as a player, because he is so much more efficient when he's on a limited workload. And so the Bengals and Chase Brown, they want their running back room to be the most efficient, and so they need some role player to come in, to take snaps, to play in that passing game, to protect Joe Burrow. And really, that's exactly what Zach Moss is and what he can do. And so he can rush, for 3.7 yards per carry, be solid, have a high successful rushing rate, and he pass blocks very, very well, one of the better pass blockers in the league. And he was also much more efficient in the passing game than Chase Brown was on a reception basis. He was getting 1.5 more yards per reception than Brown was last year. And so if we are looking at this as a split backfield again, going back to roughly a 50-50% split between Brown and somebody, then the most likely person that they would slot in is Moss. Now, definitely this backfield could get a lot muddier with P. Ryan and Taj Brooks being in the mix, but we're shooting for some upside here in the 22nd, 23rd round of startups, or for a late projected 4th round pick. And so the thing, the most likely outcome, if this backfield is split, is that Moss gets most of the work that Brown's not getting. And if he's doing that and he's being used primarily as the receiving back, which is what was kind of reflected in their split last year before Moss went down, he could easily score 10 to 12 PPR points in 2025. Plus, he has a ton of upside if Brown misses time. He is the clear option for leading that backfield in the event of Chase Brown missing a significant amount of time. Now we're going to move over to the tight ends, and we've got Zach Ertz, formerly of the Eagles, now on the Washington Commanders, and he ended the season with the Commanders as the tight end 7 in PPR leagues, averaging 10.4 points per game. Without Washington making any high-end additions to their receiving core, Ertz really has a great shot at being Jaden Daniels' number 2 option for a second year in a row. In .5 tight end premium leagues last year, Ertz was scoring pretty similarly to guys like George Pickens, DK Metcalf, DeAndre Swift, Khalil Shakir, guys who are going 10 rounds ahead of him right now. So even if you have a solid tight end 1, Ertz could still be a good guy to pick up as a week-to-week flex play if you ever need him. And if you're someone who faded the tight end position and you're just trying to grab some high upside production wise players, I think Ertz is a great grab. While you might have, yeah, might be worried about Ben Snot taking some work away from Ertz, I'm really not worried about it. Sinat played every single game last year and racked up only 5 targets for 5 receptions in the entire 2024 season. Ertz is absolutely going to be the alpha in that offense until he either retires or, again, he falls off a cliff, which, he's getting pretty close to the tight end age cliff, but, the tight end age cliff is much higher than it is for wide receivers and running backs. Next and lastly, we have Tyler Conklin. He has put up roughly 10 PPR points per game, like every single season for the past 4 years, and I don't see any reason why he would stop now. He's now in the best situation he's ever been in, and he's only competing with Will Dissly and the rookie Oronde, sorry if I'm butchering his name, but Gadsden, for that tight end 1 spot in the Chargers offense. And, while we might be excited about Gadsden, those guys that are outside of the top end, like round 1 tight ends, usually take a year or two to develop before they can really be impactful, if they ever are. And so next year, the only player on that offense that I am very confident will get more volume than Conklin is Ladd McConkey. Sure, we have Trey Harris and Quentin Johnston there, but Trey Harris is more of a field stretcher, big play, low volume type of player, and I'm not worried about Quentin Johnston, just to be completely honest with you. I feel like that argument is fairly self-explanatory, so we'll just keep moving. So there's a pretty clear path for Conklin to have the second highest target share in an offense where Justin Herbert's throwing the ball, and that's pretty attractive to me. I know that the Chargers are going to be a run-first offense, but we're not going for league breakers. We're not going for a guy who's going to put up 20 points per game. I think Conklin on the Chargers could just be a solid 10, 11, 12 point per game in standard PPR leagues, but in tight end premium dynasty leagues, he could score even more points. He could score like 14, 15 points per game in those leagues, and not only be a good tight end, but again, a good flex option as well. And he has been all but forgotten going in like the early 20 round range in startups. So that was a list of the absolute cheapest, almost free production at every position. And I think it's really worth sending out some offers for these guys if you need some depth players to throw into your lineup, or at the top of your bench, guys that you can throw in on a week-to-week basis if you have some injuries, you have some bye weeks that you want to fill holes in. And some managers, I think, will realize the worth in these players and want to hold them at price, and that's totally fair. But I think that there's still some managers who are looking to get these guys off of their rosters, and I think that you can probably find 1 or 2 of them on waivers right now in some of your leagues. So, again, none of these players are going to break dynasty football next year. A lot of them could end up having little to no value next year. But we're starting out at such a low opportunity cost to get these guys that I think it's really worth it to get them on your team. If you can get them for a late projected third, a late projected fourth, two late projected fourths, if you need someone to fill in, All right, that is it for you guys. If you have any other players that you feel like are great values production-wise for where they're going, I'd love to hear it down in the comments. But thank you for listening, and I'll catch you guys next time.